There's a specific type of person who becomes the most powerful criminal in the Western Hemisphere, and it's not who you think it is. It's not the most violent man in the room. It's not the greediest. It's not the most fearless. It's the one who learned, very early, that the world does not protect you, so you have to build a world that does. If you've ever wondered how a human being ends up commanding armies, bribing governors, and sleeping 4 hours a night in a mountain compound surrounded by men he doesn't fully trust, this video is going to show you exactly what happens inside that mind. Because it's not a story about evil. It's a story about adaptation, taken to its most extreme conclusion. We talk about cartel leaders like they're a different species, like they were born in a dark room somewhere and handed a gun before they could walk. That narrative is comfortable because it keeps them at a distance. If they're monsters, we don't have to think too hard about how they were made. But the research on criminal psychology, trauma, and institutional violence tells a different story, one that's far more uncomfortable to sit with. Think about where this starts. Not at the top, at the bottom. A plastic chair outside a convenience store in Culiacan. A 15-year-old with a phone, a Coke, and one job: watch the road. This is where the psychology actually begins. Not with the decision to become a criminal, but with the simple reality that this is the job available, this is the money being offered, and this is the world you were born into. Psychologists who study early recruitment into organized crime consistently find that initial entry is rarely ideological. It's economic. It's social. It's proximity. You join because someone you know is already in. You join because $100 a week is more than anyone in your family has ever offered you for your time. And here is where the first psychological transformation happens, the one nobody talks about. When the first serious threat arrives, next time we bury you in the desert, something rewires. Not dramatically, not with a movie score playing in the background. Quietly, the brain begins recalibrating what counts as a normal threat level. Neuroscientists studying chronic stress exposure in adolescents have documented what they call threat normalization, the process by which the nervous system stops treating danger as an exception and begins treating it as the baseline condition of existence. This isn't toughness, it's trauma adaptation, and once it happens, it's very difficult to undo. So by the time this person is 25, running a cell, managing 10 men and 100 kilos a month, the fear that would paralyze most people has been replaced by something that looks, from the outside, like calm. And that calm is what gets noticed. That calm is what gets promoted. But here's where the conversation usually stops. And here's what I actually want you to think about. Most analyses of cartel leadership focus on the violence, the executions, the narco corridos, the gold-plated pistols. But violence in the psychology of someone who rises to the very top of this structure is actually a tool of last resort. The men who climb to regional operator, to plaza boss, to cartel leader are, first and foremost, extraordinarily skilled managers of human behavior under extreme uncertainty. They read people, they model incentives. They understand that fear alone creates fragile loyalty, and fragile loyalty gets you killed. A cartel leader who survives for a decade, who coordinates cocaine shipments from Colombia, precursor chemicals from China, tunnels under the border, drones, submarines, is not operating on rage. He's operating on something much closer to strategic intelligence, cold, precise, and deeply psychological. And nobody really talks about this combination. The cultural conversation about cartel bosses tends to flatten them into caricatures: the savage, the gangster, the narco king. But the specific psychological profile of someone who actually reaches the top and stays there doesn't fit those categories, because that person has developed something genuinely rare: the ability to hold radical contradictions simultaneously without breaking down. Here is the paradox that defines them. On one side, absolute power. You control a state. You have 500 men. You generate $20 million a month. Governors take your calls. Generals take your money. You are, by every external measure, untouchable. On the other side, absolute isolation. You cannot go to your daughter's quinceañera. You cannot visit your mother's grave. You don't appear in photographs. You've had plastic surgery. Your own children don't recognize you. You execute men based on suspicion alone, not because you're certain they betrayed you, but because the cost of being wrong is your life, and your brain has been running threat calculations for so long that it can no longer distinguish between a real threat and a possible one. Research on chronic hypervigilance, the psychological state of sustained threat awareness, shows that long-term exposure fundamentally alters the prefrontal cortex's ability to assess risk accurately. You don't become more rational under sustained threat. You become more reactive, more paranoid, more isolated. This is the part most people are never told. The golden cage is not a metaphor. It is the psychological endpoint of a specific kind of adaptation. Every decision made over 20 years in this structure, every threat normalized, every competitor neutralized, every loyalty purchased, has been optimizing for survival. And survival, at that level, requires the systematic elimination of everything that makes you vulnerable: attachment, trust, presence, love. By the time you reach the top, you have successfully removed every soft target from your life, and in doing so, you have also removed every source of meaning that wasn't tied to power. What's left is the empire, and the empire requires feeding. Psychologists who study malignant narcissism and antisocial adaptation in high-power criminal environments describe a phenomenon they call the identity-power fusion, the point at which a person can no longer separate who they are from what they control. The cartel isn't something this person runs, it is who this person is, which is exactly why retirement is impossible. It's not just that they know too much, though that's true. It's that without the structure, there is no self. The man at the top of the cartel has spent decades building an identity that only exists inside the machine. Step outside it, and there's nothing there. This is what gets buried under all the narco mythology, under the corridos and the Netflix series and the DEA wanted posters. The person at the center of it all is not invincible. They are the product of an adaptation that consumed everything it touched, including, eventually, themselves. The cycle continues because the structure continues. Your nephew steps up, your lieutenant, someone always does. Because at the bottom, there is still a 15-year-old on a plastic chair outside a store in Culiacan, watching the road, learning that this is how the world works, and the psychology that produces the boss at the top begins and always begins with that kid deciding that the world doesn't protect you, so you have to build something that does, even if it costs you everything you were trying to protect in the first place. If this kind of analysis resonated with you, the psychology behind the systems, not just the events, consider subscribing. It helps me keep making content at this level of depth. I have more videos coming that follow the same approach. Different subjects, same kind of examination. I'll see you in the next one.